Catalyst 2030 started life as a WhatsApp group among social entrepreneurs, connecting to envision real transformational change. Launched at the World Economic Forum in January 2020, it's grown into a global movement accelerating change to ensure the SDGs are reached by 2030. Fueled by passion, our 550 members working in 175 countries have collectively put in an amazing 50,000 volunteer hours, touching the lives of 2 billion people. And we're driven by values, to which we hold ourselves accountable. 2020 was a busy year, co-creating 3 reports with partners and producing one of our own. Inviting high-level guests to participate in the Catalyzing Change campaign, hosting fireside chats and expert hours, which will be continuing in 2021. To celebrate our achievements, together we placed our supporters in the limelight with the first Catalyst 2030 Awards for Systemic Change. With the blessing of the Dalai Lama, we celebrated finalists and winners in the following categories: special recognition for our early supporters, individual philanthropists, donor organizations, philanthropic intermediaries, corporate organizations, bi- and multilateral organizations, and 4 regional winners in the category of national governments. And now on to Catalyzing Change Week 2021. During this social entrepreneur-led event, we bring together diverse stakeholders in over 100 sessions to showcase their systems change efforts and the best practices that can accelerate our work in pursuit of the SDGs.
Hi everyone, welcome. It's so nice to see you all here. Just a quick housekeeping announcement. This meeting will be recorded and uploaded to the Catalyst 2030 YouTube. So if you have any privacy concerns, please reach out to me. I'll post my email in the chat. And now over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Julia. I'm gonna help get us started today. So my name's Amanda. I'm part of Good Market, and I'm also a member of Callus 2030. And I know we just saw a short video, but because a lot of the people who registered for this event are not Callus 2030 members, I wanted to start with just a very brief introduction to what Callus 2030 is. So as the video mentioned, it's a global network of social entrepreneurs and social innovators that are working to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. So a big sense of urgency. The global challenges that we're facing, this is something we all know, it's too big for any one organization. So the idea is for all of us to be able to come together across regions, across sectors, to be able to coordinate action, mobilize and optimize resources, and collaborate for systems change. And the values were mentioned also in the video, but I think it's important to bring up again because it's absolutely at the core of what we're going to be talking about today. So anyone that's a Callus 2030 member commits to keeping people and nature at the center, having a co-creative mindset, collaborative leadership, humble audacity, and a spirit of generosity. So if you're interested in finding out more about how to become a member, there's lots of details on the website. And if you're interested in this group, as we're moving forward, we're welcoming other people to get involved, and you can send an email to Julia. So this Catalyst market, what we're going to be talking about in this section, is a really great example of a Callus 2030 collaboration. It started with, we can wait on that for just 1 second. It started with discussions about alternatives to Amazon and other platform monopolies. Most of us in the group are working with people from marginalized communities, so it was about how can we make it easier for them to access online marketplace opportunities, both locally and internationally. And then the second part is how do we make it easier for people to buy better, right? We all want our everyday choices to also help catalyze systems change. So how can we make it easier to find better products for a better world? The idea, and this is a key part, the idea isn't to reinvent the wheel or to start something new. It's about finding synergies in our ongoing work. It's about how can we collaborate? How can we have radical collaboration, in Meagan's words? How can we collaborate to speed things up? So this marketplace collaboration started earlier this year. There have been 10 organizations that are Catalyst 2030 members that have been actively participating. Collectively, we have experience working with social enterprises and producer groups, particularly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We have experience with agriculture and food, with creative industries, fashion, housewares, also wellness. We have experience with curation, certification, software, logistics. So that's what we've started with. And today's session is about expanding that initial circle. It's an opportunity to share your own ideas and experiences and also to get involved. So we have 1 hour together. We're going to start with a brief overview, and then we're going to hear from each of the subgroups. Then after that, we'll have a chance for deeper discussion. We'll have breakout sessions, and you get to choose which breakout group that you're interested in. And then finally, we'll come back together and we'll talk about next steps. So I think I'm going to share the overview, and then I'll hand it over to the other members. Julia, can you put that slide up now? Super, thanks. Great. At the top, you can see the systems change that we're all working towards, right? Achieving the SDGs and transitioning to an economy that's inclusive and regenerative, something that's good for people and good for the planet. This specific collaboration, it's focused on online marketplace strategies that help connect marginalized producers and social enterprises with conscious consumers. That's both locally and internationally. The foundation is the horizontal you see at the bottom, right? As a group, we started out talking about shared values. Everything else has been based on that. So we've talked about commons and platform cooperatives, data trusts, standards for participation, the role of vulnerable groups and intermediaries. And Jacob will be explaining more in just a minute. If these are topics that you're interested in, you can join him in the breakout session. And then the other groups are the 3 pillars that you can see. So I'll be facilitating a discussion on enabling infrastructure. That's focused more on curation systems and software integrations. And then EFI is the anchor for the producer support pillar. That includes capacity building, but it's also financial services like working capital that make it possible for producers to hold inventory. And finally, Meagan and Aaron will talk about ecosystem services, that pillar. So I'm going to hand it over to Jacob to provide an overview of the shared values horizontal. Over to you, Jacob.
Thank you, Amanda. So what are the shared values that something like this should have to be able to work? Because what we're talking about is a producer-owned marketplace of literally thousands of shops. A question that we're normally asked right off the bat is, how are you going to compete with somebody like Amazon? And I think one answer, at least that I have, is must we be competing with Amazon? Are there other ways of competing with Amazon? I mean, do you need to directly take them on because they're big? So one question is, what if we focused on effectiveness rather than efficiency? Is it really about getting stuff at the cheapest price, at the fastest delivery, or is there something else? And in a sense, this platform is aimed at conscious consumption. So just to give you an example, I'm wearing a shirt which is not from Amazon, and I ordered it. It's a beta version of something that we just launched. I mean, we're testing out. Now I know from buying this shirt how much of the money that I paid went to the people who made this shirt, how much was kept by the platform, and what material it was made with. So this is actually hand-spun cotton. Now, when we talk about effectiveness, this is some of the elements that make up effectiveness. Where did you get it from? Who made it? How much did they earn? The other benefits possibly is when you talk about people, the people who make things, do they gain dignity and respect, or is it just money that they get? As a user, do you get a connect? I mean, I think that now that I know where this shirt is from, I know who made this shirt. It's not likely that I'm going to, chuck this away after 3 washes, which is what usually happens with fast fashion. So how do you take the anonymity away from objects and make them our friends? Could you go to the next slide, please, Julia? So the other thing is, I think a lot of what has been happening recently has been how the commons have been eroded by both markets and by governments. There were things that were built, safeguarded, and nurtured by community. These have become far fewer. And a lot of things that we see right now, especially in a country like India, which is going through the second wave of COVID, and it's horrendous. One could see that one could say that the community commons have been eroded so much that today we are helpless. There are other questions too. If you have, I mean, anybody who's in this business has a logo, has a shop front, has a story. Of course, there are people who don't. How do we take care of people who do and people who don't? How inclusive can we be? What is the kind of shared backend that we can have? Could we have as many fulfillment centers as in Amazon's parlance as we have members? Can we operate in as many countries that Amazon does? How might we include the smallest and most vulnerable, helped by perhaps the most robust? So what we're going to do shortly, can we go to the next slide, please? So what we're going to do as a group, those of you who are interested in building out on these shared values, and I've just put 6 sort of large groupings, do join the shared values breakout. Thank you. Over to Amanda.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jacob. So in the enabling infrastructure pillar, which will be another breakout, we're focusing on 2 main challenges. The first challenge is related to trust, right? And transparency, exactly what Jacob was talking about, right? If the goal is to have ethical marketplace spaces, we need to know that everything on it is produced in a way that's good for people on the planet. And we also know that whenever there's a market opportunity or financial opportunity, there's a real risk of greenwashing and social washing. And of course, that erodes trust. So over the past few decades, a number of different certification schemes have emerged to solve this problem. And this has been a really valuable service, but it's also presented some new challenges. One of those is that many of the producers in our community, we know they're fully committed to socially and environmentally responsible practices, but they don't have certification. So this could be that they're at a startup stage, or they don't have the resources, or maybe it doesn't make sense in their context. The second issue is that certification has actually become a big business. So the number of different certifications and labels have really proliferated, especially over the last 10 or 15 years. Some of these labels are funded by corporate interests, or they don't have transparent standards, or they don't mean what it looks like they mean on their nice little, the nice little drawing on their label. And it can be really confusing for buyers. So fortunately for this collaboration, we're able to draw on a lot of work that's already been done. You can go to the next slide, Julia. And part of that is that Good Market has a free online curation process that works across sectors, regions, languages, and legal statuses. So there can be groups that aren't registered yet that can also be included. This has minimum standards that are owned by the community. It's set up as a commons. It's managed by the community, and there's a crowdsourced monitoring system. Right now there's 7 languages, but there's an open translation platform, so it's really easy to include new languages. And we're getting people signing up, on a smartphone in local language, often with the help of children or young people from the community to fill the form. And we also have a lot of groups on it that are certified and are registered, larger organizations. And it's set up to be able to recognize those kinds of certifications so that you're able to filter, for example, and find all of the people who have WFTO. So the part that's really exciting is it's set up to be able to allow secondary curation if a group wants to set their own higher standards. So the idea would be that this Catalyst market collaboration based on the shared values that Jacob mentioned, based on the decisions of all the producers, is able to have additional standards and a verification process for groups that are e-commerce ready. This has to do with how they operate. It could be around transparency of payment, around using environmentally responsible packaging. Do they have the capacity for order fulfillment? The group from Nourishing Africa has been thinking a lot about food safety and hygiene. So we're able to have a secondary curation process for that. If we can go to the next slide. So that's on the trust and curation piece. The second challenge is related to visibility. The situation that we have today is not the same as when Amazon and eBay first started back in the 90s. There are a lot of affordable kind of no code and low code tools that make it possible to set up an online store or marketplace even in an afternoon. So there's Shopify, there's WordPress has plugins like WooCommerce, there's ShareTribe, there's a lot of different tools. And from a movement perspective, this is fantastic, right? We're trying to transition to a system that's diverse and resilient. We want people to be able to create stores and marketplaces for their own communities. It's in their language, tells their story. It's appropriate for their context. So this is really, really valuable. So for example, Flourish, as Jacob mentioned, they have a beautiful ethical marketplace for artisans. There's a group called Social Supermarket that focuses on UK social enterprises. Both of us who's joining today, they have one for zero waste products in Europe. But again, this creates some challenges, right? From a consumer side, it's easier to find things on a platform monopoly like Amazon than it is to look on all of these different smaller stores and marketplaces. And then on the producer side, just a second, on the producer side, people are feeling like they need to list on multiple platforms to be able to be visible. And that can be time consuming and expensive to coordinate. So for this one, we can go to the next slide. The focus is on software integrations so that we can have collective visibility. So what you're seeing here is based on the work we've been doing with Good Market, but there's an exciting opportunity to expand it and create a curated catalyst market. Basically, existing online stores and marketplaces would be able to sync their listings to middleware so that we would have collective visibility. And then they can choose if they want to redirect customers back to their own store, or if they want to manage through a collective payment system, or to be able to channel it to appropriate local payment services. So an API would make it possible for communities like Catalyst Market to have their own custom front-end design that feels right for the community. And it also makes it possible to sync with other platforms. So for example, you could list on other marketplaces or sync with procurement platforms like SAP's Ariba or different things like that. So the idea with this is having this kind of shared community-owned infrastructure increases opportunities for lots of other integrations and innovations within this community and ecosystem. So there's some fantastic first mile initiatives coming up that could be integrated. There's social enterprises working on cross-marketing, impact monitoring, supply chain tracking, community currencies, lots of different opportunities. So I'm hoping we can talk about this more in the enabling infrastructure breakout, if anyone's interested. And I'm going to pass it over now to Ify to talk about producer support.
Thanks, Amanda. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm just going to quickly run you through what we have in mind when it comes to support. Next slide, please, Julia. So for us, we really see producer support as a way of providing ongoing capacity building support to artisan groups, to farmer groups, and to small enterprises. And through this collaboration, we really want to ensure that we're targeting the work that Catalyst members are doing. As Amanda said, we're not trying to reinvent any wheel. We're simply trying to amplify the impact that Catalyst members are engaged in currently and synergize these efforts to ensure that we maximize and scale the impact that is currently ongoing across the various opportunities and initiatives that Catalyst members are currently engaged in. And so the pillar really works to try and enable marginalized producers access new market opportunities through scaling their internal capacity as well as their knowledge and their access to resources, whether it be financial, it could be an aspect such as advertising, it could also be just internal structures. So next slide, please. how we see, and I just need to establish that this is an idea, and we look forward to getting more ideas from you as to how this can be better. But for us, we see capacity building in 4 key ways. And the first is standards, regulations, and metrics. And for us, through workshops, e-courses, and hand-holding techniques, we aim to provide quality control systems and standards for food, entrepreneurs, businesses, and artisans. And one thing we want to add here is that, as Amanda said, Nourishing Africa looks into food policies and regulations across Africa to see how we can ensure that agribusinesses are able to access this information, because oftentimes the issue is more the lack of knowledge than the inability to meet the criteria. We also want to ensure that through this, we're creating a safe space for knowledge sharing and storytelling, which would allow for members to share best practices, training materials and methodologies, things that have worked for us to implement this into our various organizations as well as into this marketplace, to ensure that we're scaling up best practices, success stories, and practical solutions within these workshops and curated events and knowledge sharing sessions. We also want to engage in ongoing capacity support and capacity building. And for this, what we mean by this is that there's no stage in which we decide that at this point, capacity support or support in any form is no longer needed. It should be a case where artisans, food entrepreneurs, whatever the case may be, are able to continuously engage in scaling and growing and ensuring that they have access, or we can provide some form of access to various networks, depending on what it is they might require. And then lastly, working capital and logistics. As Amanda said earlier, it's really important that we provide a platform where these SMEs, often MSMEs, are able to access working capital, favorable access to financing, and partnering them with financial services and service providers that can do this for them to, for instance, hold inventory so they can fulfill orders, and as well as for them to link up with one another so that they're able to share experiences between intermediaries and so forth. Next slide, please. So when we think about capacity building, oftentimes the question is, so how do you measure impact? And for us, we need to, or we see it very strongly as ensuring that not only are we measuring those that are engaged in the marketplace, but we also think about how they're able to increase sales through the e-commerce platform, how we're able to see growth within their organizations, both at a small scale and a large scale, how Catalyst members have been able to individually and collectively provide continuous support to their various organizations and as a community. So impact is not just numbers. And I think that's very important to say. For us, impact is tangible physical growth outside of just numbers. So we will discuss working examples and various examples that we have been engaged in and we think can scale in the breakout sessions later on. Thank you.
Fantastic. Pass it over to Meagan.
Meagan, over to you.
Sorry, I always forget to unmute. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. In this last pillar, ecosystem services, we really looked at the pain points and often the bottlenecks that really stop producers from being able to make that last step to getting things from them to customers, because we know it's at that point that trust is really built. The ability to order and receive the kurta that Jacob ordered, and making sure that happens seamlessly and not in 6 months, but in a reasonable amount of time, becomes really critical. And so the devil's in the details, and this pillar is really around how small organizations can be mapped directly to those services and those facilities they need in the larger ecosystem, even as a relatively small individual player. So my colleague Arendt is going to walk you through a slide that we've put together to kind of show what this landscape looks like. And in the breakout room, we'll be discussing particular pain points and coming to build a curated toolkit, a kind of repository of have solutions to your problems that you might find helpful in working through those problems. Arend?
Thank you, Meagan. So this is a very simple slide, guys. I'm Arend Sahan from the World Fair Trade Organization. We're the social enterprise wing of the fair trade movement. So the fair trade system that is exclusively for social enterprises. And we've been looking at this a lot from different angles and working with a lot of our member organizations to figure out how to get through some of the barriers particularly in e-commerce that are emerging to take advantage of the opportunities. And there are a couple of areas I think we'll go through in our breakout room, but just to highlight one or two really important ones to sort of whet your appetite. Logistics is a huge one. I mean, how do you have the stock ready to meet the expectations that Meagan mentioned, that, you know, it doesn't come in 6 months, but it comes in a reasonable amount of time. Unfortunately, a lot of the dominant players have set very high expectations for consumers about when a product arrives, how convenient it is, how available it is, how many choices you have. All of this presents a significant challenge in terms of logistics, in terms of shipping, warehousing, fulfillment. Those are some of the things that are very forefront of our mind. But of course, there are, you know, other services in terms of helping producer social enterprises to get their designs right, to have the right kind of production technology, to have the right kind of marketing, to go to the right places, to be able to exhibit their products to the right customers or consumers, and also gain the other professional services that allow them to make the right decisions and follow the right processes to take advantage of the opportunities that I think everybody is seeing. Over to you, Amanda.
Okay, great. Super. So now you have a sense of what are the themes for the different breakouts. There'll be four to choose from. So the first is the shared values, enabling infrastructure, producer support, and then this last one about ecosystem services. We're going to have 20 minutes together in the breakout rooms. And please pick somebody in your room to help share back a few key points at the end. And then we'll come back all together and Meagan will help wrap things up and we'll talk about next steps. All back. If we can just have, I think Meagan's going to close us out in a minute, but if we could just have a brief sharing back into the main group of any interesting point that came up in your breakout. Jacob, is there someone from your group that's able to share?
Yes, Pragati, would you go for it?
Sure. Jacob, I'd request to just give a brief intro of the discussion and I will just fill in, please.
Yeah. So we looked at shared values, and some of it was around who would own the platform. Yes, Pragati.
And yeah, so there were different responses and we discussed that, you know, if there is a process that at every touch point, like the entire link in the chain, including the supply chain, if all of them could own and have a partnership in it, is something from the link that you start from that ends till the customer. Everybody has, you know, a say in it and they have some ownership in it, is what we discussed. In terms of how might it be structured, we discussed that, you know, there should be a structure that you know, works in a very inclusive manner. It's pragmatic, and the representation is definitely important, and it should take into account considerations that enable it to be flexible. And agility is important, right? Because we also have to be aligned with the customer expectation if we want to survive and if you want to, you know, scale. So that is something that we thought of. And in terms of
yeah, I think I could just help you round it off with saying that when it comes to value creation, what are the best practices that can be picked up from other kind of situations that can be applied here? Yep, I think that we'll have to move to the next group. Thank you. Thank you, Pragati.
Thanks. Maeve, will you share from the Enabling Infrastructure group?
Absolutely. So just briefly, we talked about some of the work that group members were already doing around nudging and sort of influencing consumer behavior that was driven by these shared values, and how creating this infrastructure could help support some of that ongoing work, but also integrate it into this larger, more collective community platform. We also talked about the benefit of having a social enterprise structure that is running this entire marketplace, right? And that you could change the way that these online marketplaces run by actually facilitating more interaction and collaboration between the customer and the social enterprise itself, right? Instead of being protected of the data because that's what traditional business tells us we have to do in order to to give investors their return that they're expecting. There are other things that we can focus on, and it allows for some flexibility and creativity that will be really positive, we think, for both consumers and the social enterprises who are involved. We shared some interesting examples of things that were already happening that we should focus on, and also talked a little bit about how some of those different projects, ongoing projects, are facilitating kind of pipeline development of social enterprises. So at the B2B level, why keeping an eye on that type of social procurement is also really important for the development of B2C marketplaces and that type of infrastructure as well. I don't know if anyone has anything else they want to add, or is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Meg. For the producer support group, Ify, is there someone who can share back?
Sure. Shazata, do you want to report back? Or you're on mute?
I think if you can start the initial part, I can fill in with the challenges.
Okay, happy to do it. So we discussed various aspects. The first was around providing support around good product photography and standardization of this to ensure that those engaged in the platform are able to present their products in the best possible way. We also discussed challenges around onboarding. Many different organizations are engaged in various forms of marketplaces, but the issue is onboarding, as well as verifying who is a social entrepreneur versus who is what. And that's something that we would have to dive deeper into and try and see where we could provide support in that sense. One interesting aspect that resonated well with the group was the idea of providing financial support and linkages where possible to help these organizations scale as well. And lastly, we discussed the tech challenges and seeing how we could overcome that, as well as tech challenges as an organization when it comes to algorithm and SEOs and changing structures and competing with the big guys who have a whole department versus small SMEs who have one person trying to figure this out. So yes, that's an overview.
Yes, one of the other challenges you mentioned was visibility. Because larger platforms like Amazon have a lot of budget on spending on advertisements, and social enterprises mostly do not have that kind of resources to spend on large advertisements. So how do you ensure visibility in that?
Super. I'm going to hand it over. Meagan, is there someone from your group that can report back?
Aaron should go ahead and do that, and I will go ahead and wrap up after that.
Sure, I'll be swift, as Meagan will also refer to this. But we discussed a number of things. It's there's such a broad range of services needed to make this work. So a lot of it was exploring whether we have the skills within this community, this hypothetical community we want to create, who's joining into this e-commerce journey together, or whether we need to bring this in. And the answer sounds like it's a little bit of a mix. Marketing was one that's especially important to bring those skills in, to bring that support in. Digital marketing is going to be important, but again, it matters whether we're talking, which audiences we're talking about that we're going to be targeting. We talked about the potential scale of this. that we're, how big is our vision? How niche are we in the marketplace? And therefore the kind of services we'll need in the ecosystem that we'll need to create will vary. The difficulties of navigating e-commerce platforms, and those are quite heavy for many. And also we discussed a little bit whether the cooperative model is appropriate or not for the kind of platform we're talking about. And Trevor, who's a very much an expert on this from the New School, had some doubts whether actually that is the appropriate model, or we need to explore other models for how we set up a platform.
Okay, so I think we are at base talking about radical collaboration. And that kind of collaboration, the kind that's going to be needed to shift our ideas about this, is going to require an unlearning process for both us as creators and marketplace participants, but also for our consumers. And so we have to think about both those sides if we're really thinking about innovating truly new and different paradigm breaking solutions to some of the challenges that have so far stopped people from competing with the more monopolized versions. On behalf of Amanda, Arendt, Ify, Jacob, and myself, I think we agree that it is our shared values and trust which are our compass points in helping this group to move this idea forward. So please check out the links in the chat. There's some excellent links that have been given even on platform governance. And then anybody who's interested to join us in this working group, please email Julia. She's given you her email. We are all Catalyst 2030, and we are so grateful for your collaboration today, your participation, and your ideas. You are what keeps us all moving forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.